The first wall didn't just collapse. It took 42 years of memories with it. As splintered wood crashed into the front yard, 73-year-old Arthur Bennett stood frozen across the street, gripping a paper grocery bag that slowly slipped from his trembling hands. Fresh apples rolled onto the pavement. A framed photograph inside the bag shattered. Across from him, the woman responsible for it all smiled. She folded her arms, adjusted her designer sunglasses, and watched the excavator tear into the home where Arthur had raised his children, where his late wife, Margaret, had taken her final breath only 18 months earlier. For Victoria Langford, president of the Cedar Ridge HOA, this wasn't cruelty. It was community standards. But what happened exactly 7 minutes later would become the most talked about event Cedar Ridge had ever seen. Because just as the second wall collapsed, a long black SUV quietly turned into the neighborhood, and everyone stopped talking. Arthur Bennett wasn't the kind of man who argued. He had served 8 years in the U.S. Army before spending nearly 4 decades as a bridge engineer. His neighbors knew him as the quiet widower who waved at every passing car, shoveled snow for elderly residents, and never missed Sunday church. After Margaret passed away from cancer, Arthur rarely left the house except to buy groceries or visit her grave. That old blue farmhouse wasn't expensive. It wasn't glamorous. But every floorboard carried a memory. Every room still echoed with Margaret's laughter. Losing that house would mean losing the last place where she still felt alive. Victoria knew that. She simply didn't care. 3 months earlier, Cedar Ridge elected Victoria as HOA president. Within weeks, warning letters flooded the neighborhood. Mailbox color violations. Grass half an inch too tall. Holiday decorations left up 1 day too long. Residents whispered about her, but nobody challenged her. Victoria loved reminding everyone of one sentence: the HOA always wins. Then she noticed Arthur's property. The paint had faded. The porch leaned slightly. The roof needed repairs Arthur couldn't afford after paying hospital bills. To Victoria, the house was an eyesore. To Arthur, it was home. At first came the fines. $200, $500, then thousands. Arthur tried explaining. His savings had disappeared paying for Margaret's treatment. He promised repairs as soon as possible. Victoria never listened. Every meeting ended the same way. Rules are rules. Neighbors watched silently. Some felt sorry for Arthur. Most were simply afraid of becoming Victoria's next target. Then something strange happened. Arthur stopped attending HOA meetings altogether. He stopped arguing, stopped appealing, stopped answering letters. Victoria interpreted the silence as surrender. She smiled every time another certified notice came back unopened. Inside the HOA office, she confidently told the board, "He'll be gone before summer." No one questioned her. Then came demolition day. At exactly 8 a.m., heavy machinery entered Cedar Ridge. Several neighbors stepped outside holding coffee cups, confused. Some believed it was road construction. Others thought a tree was coming down. Instead, they watched workers place orange fencing around Arthur's home. One elderly woman gasped, "What are they doing?" Victoria answered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Cleaning up the neighborhood." Arthur wasn't there. He had gone into town to buy groceries. By the time he returned, the excavator had already punched through his living room wall. Arthur ran. His grocery bag hit the sidewalk. "Stop!" His voice cracked. Construction workers paused only long enough to look toward Victoria. She calmly lifted a folder. "We have authorization." Arthur stared in disbelief. "No, you don't." His knees nearly gave out. "My wife built that porch herself." Nobody answered. The machine kept moving. Wood shattered. Glass exploded. Family photographs disappeared beneath broken beams. Arthur stood helpless, not because he lacked courage, because no one seemed willing to listen. Several neighbors quietly recorded everything on their phones. One whispered, "This doesn't feel legal." Another replied, "If she's wrong, why are the workers still here?" Even the demolition crew looked uncomfortable. But paperwork was paperwork. Orders were orders. Victoria slowly walked toward Arthur. Without lowering her sunglasses, she smiled. "You had every opportunity to comply." Arthur's eyes filled with tears. "You didn't destroy a house. You destroyed 42 years. For a brief second, even Victoria hesitated. Then she shrugged. Should have painted it. The excavator started again. The bedroom where Margaret had spent her final days disappeared beneath dust. Arthur looked away. He simply couldn't watch anymore. And then, without sirens, without flashing lights, A black SUV rolled silently into Cedar Ridge. It stopped directly behind the demolition equipment. The engine turned off. Nobody recognized the vehicle. No company logo. No government plates. Just black. Perfectly clean. The neighborhood became strangely quiet. Victoria frowned. Who invited them? No one answered. The driver's door slowly opened. A man in a charcoal suit stepped out. Then another. Then a woman carrying a leather briefcase. None of them spoke. They simply looked at Arthur, as if they had been searching for him. Arthur's expression changed. Not to relief. Recognition. He whispered just 4 words. "You're finally here." The suited man nodded once, then turned toward the excavator. "Shut it down." The operator instinctively lifted his hands off the controls. Victoria stepped forward immediately. "You have absolutely no authority here." The man calmly reached into his jacket, pulled out a sealed envelope, looked directly into Victoria's eyes, and said one sentence that made every member of the HOA board go pale. "This property was never yours to touch." One sentence brought an entire demolition site to a standstill. "This property was never yours to touch." The excavator fell silent. The workers stepped back. Even the neighbors holding up their phones stopped whispering. HOA President Victoria Langford laughed once, shaking her head. "You've got to be kidding me." The man in the charcoal suit didn't react. Instead, he handed the sealed envelope to the county sheriff, who had just arrived after multiple 911 calls from frightened neighbors. The sheriff broke the seal. He read the first page. Then he stopped. He flipped to the second page. His expression changed completely. He looked up at Arthur Bennett, then back at Victoria. "Ma'am." His voice was calm but unmistakably serious. "I think you'd better stop talking." The woman carrying the leather briefcase introduced herself. "My name is Rebecca Collins. I'm an attorney representing the Bennett Family Trust." Victoria frowned. "What trust?" Arthur never smiled. He simply looked at the broken remains of his home. Margaret had told him years ago, "If anything ever happens to this house, call the number inside the blue envelope." He had never opened it. Not until 3 days earlier, when the demolition notice arrived. Inside was a decades-old trust agreement, signed by Margaret's father in 1984. Most people in Cedar Ridge had no idea the land beneath Arthur's house had once belonged to a family that donated roads, utilities, and part of the neighborhood itself to the county. The agreement contained one extraordinary clause. No structure on the original Bennett parcel could ever be demolished without written approval from the trust. That approval had never been requested, and it had never been granted. Victoria crossed her arms. This HOA approved the demolition. Rebecca looked at her. The HOA doesn't own this property. It never did. The county records make that very clear. The sheriff quietly asked one of his deputies to secure the area. The demolition crew lowered every machine. No one touched another brick. Then the county building inspector arrived. He reviewed the permits. His face tightened. "The address is correct." He paused. "But the legal parcel number isn't." Silence spread across the neighborhood. The permit had been issued using the street address, but the legal description belonged to an entirely different lot. Someone had approved demolition using incomplete property records. That single mistake changed everything. The demolition company's supervisor removed his hard hat. "If the permit is defective," he swallowed hard, "we should never have started." Victoria immediately pointed at the contractor. "This isn't my fault." The supervisor shook his head. "No. You insisted we begin before the county completed its final review." Several workers quietly nodded. One even admitted Victoria had repeatedly demanded they finish it today. Every word was being recorded. Arthur slowly walked toward what remained of his front porch. Among the debris lay Margaret's cracked ceramic flower pot. He picked it up carefully. For a moment, the cameras captured not a legal battle, but an old man mourning the last physical reminder of the woman he loved. Several neighbors began crying. One elderly veteran walked across the street and placed a hand on Arthur's shoulder. Then another neighbor joined him. Then another. Within minutes, nearly the entire street stood beside Arthur. Victoria suddenly realized she was standing alone. Rebecca opened another folder. "There is one more issue." She handed copies to the sheriff. The Bennett Family Trust documented every warning letter, every fine, every board meeting, and every recorded conversation over the past 3 months. Victoria's confidence disappeared. "What conversations?" Arthur quietly answered. "Margaret always told me, keep every piece of paper. He had done exactly that. Letters, emails, certified mail receipts, meeting minutes, photographs, videos recorded by neighbors. Everything. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Arthur had been singled out, while dozens of similar homes received no violations at all. The sheriff looked at Victoria. I believe this has moved beyond an HOA dispute. We're now looking at possible criminal conduct involving property destruction and misuse of official authority. Victoria's face turned pale. This is ridiculous. Rebecca calmly replied. No, Ms. Langford. Demolishing a man's home without lawful authority is what's ridiculous. Over the following weeks, Cedar Ridge changed forever. The HOA board resigned one member after another. The county launched an independent investigation. The demolition company reached a settlement with Arthur. Its insurance policy covered the rebuilding of his home. But Arthur requested something unexpected. He asked that the new house follow Margaret's original hand-drawn design. Every detail, every window, every porch railing, every flower bed, exactly as she had imagined it. The builders agreed. Free of charge. Months later, the neighborhood gathered again. This time, not to watch a house fall, but to watch one rise. Children planted flowers. Veterans raised an American flag. Neighbors Arthur barely knew helped carry furniture inside. Above the new front door hung a small wooden plaque. Margaret's place. Arthur touched it gently. For the first time since losing his wife. He smiled. As for Victoria, the courtroom that once echoed with her confidence became painfully quiet. The judge looked over the evidence. Page after page. Photograph after photograph. Video after video. Finally, he looked directly at her. Authority is not permission. And power is never a license for cruelty. The gavel struck. Victoria lowered her head. Her time as HOA president was over. Arthur never celebrated her downfall. He never mocked her. When reporters later asked how he felt after everything that had happened, he gave a simple answer. They destroyed a house. But they couldn't destroy what my wife built inside it. And somehow, those words spread far beyond Cedar Ridge. Because people eventually forget who won the lawsuit. But they never forget the man who chose dignity over revenge.